Now we've got a few questions for you, just switching topics quickly on the Canadian Wheat Board. Now, I'm just going to read them back to back because they're both on kind of a similar vein. Now, the Conservatives, of course, are going ahead with the possibility of opening up two systems for farmers out west. So one system would be that they continue to trade collectively, and another one would allow them to sell the grain privately. Alexandra wants to know, on the future of the Canadian Wheat Board, how is dismantling going to affect our farmers and the stability of wheat prices in Canada and around the world? And a very similar question from Randall A. Fleck. How much money will the proposed destruction of the Canadian Wheat Board's single-desk selling ability cost Western farmers and the rural prairie economy?
Well, as you described it in the question, the government's line is you can have both a single-desk marketing system and an open marketing system functioning side by side, and each of them equally successful. That is just absolutely a non sequitur. Either you have a single desk or you have an open market. The two are mutually exclusive. You can't have a little bit of both. So what Mr. Harper and Mr. Ritz, the Agriculture Minister, describe as their answer, this notion of a dual market, it is a complete fiction. It has never functioned successfully anywhere in the world. The single desk system, when it loses its authority and its mandate, it just gradually fades away, and the remnants become just another grain company operating in the open market, not in a single desk system. So farmers, sadly, I mean, everybody would like to have their cake and eat it too. But on this one, you have to pick one or the other. You can't have a little bit of both. And in a plebiscite that the Canadian Wheat Board conducted...
You'll call it a plebiscite. I know our Conservative friends will call it a survey.
Actually, the legislation just says vote. That's what's in section...
There's the middle ground.
That's what's in section 47(1) of the Canadian Wheat Board Act, and no one would dispute it was a vote. It was conducted independently by the accounting firm of Myers Norris Penny, one of the large national firms. So the administration of it is above reproach. It asked a very honest question: do you want the Canadian Wheat Board, or do you want the open market? So it was a very clear-cut question that was asked. The turnout,
it's a 60-40 split.
But interestingly, let's go to turnout first. There were about 56–57% that voted. That's very close to the turnout in the last 3 federal elections. So it's a pretty good turnout. For a mail-in ballot, where you usually get 30–40%, that's a good one. They actually got a turnout of 56%. 62% of those voting said they wanted the single desk for wheat, and 51% said they wanted the single desk for barley. So in both cases, they won it. One was very close. The other was quite a substantial win. But in both cases, they opted for the single desk. And I would think the Minister of Agriculture should just take a deep breath and think about this. Very nearly 2/3 of farmers have said, at least for wheat, we want to keep the single desk. And that should be a pretty powerful statement, coming as it does in a legitimate way from farmers who make their livelihoods from this industry. They say it's their grain, it's their board, it's their business. So let them decide it, and they have the democratic producer control in their hands to make that decision.
What would you say to the other 40% who voted against it? Because clearly you want them to go with the 60% vote, you want them to keep it. But what do you tell farmers who want to trade privately, who feel kind of hamstrung by the fact that they didn't quite get enough votes there?
Well, obviously under the legislation, there would be future opportunities to come to a different decision another time. Now, once the decision is kill the board, it's over and done with forever, because under international trade rules, you wouldn't be able to put Humpty Dumpty back on the fence again. But there would be future opportunities for future votes. But beyond that, the board itself will need to be creative and innovative and flexible and accountable and responsive. And it has that legal authority, that legal capacity now under the legislation that we passed about 10 years ago to give the board this democratic control, producer control. It's not a Crown corporation. It's not run by the federal cabinet. It's not an institution of the federal government. It's a mixed governance organization where the majority control is in the hands of elected farmers. So it's primarily a farmer-based organization. But to get back to the questions, what would the consequences be? Every study that I have seen and all of the empirical evidence that I have seen would indicate that on average, the marketing system of the Canadian Wheat Board brings into the prairie economy about $500 million a year in extra value that would otherwise not be there if you didn't have the single desk system. It captures that premium in world grain markets, and then it's distributed among prairie farmers. If the board didn't exist, that $500 million would go elsewhere. It would stay on the table, and the buyers of grain would not be paying as much for Canadian product, or it would be absorbed by the shareholders of the private grain companies. The one place it wouldn't go is into the pockets of prairie grain farmers. So there'd be about $500 million in extra value for the product that's being marketed that would be lost from the prairie economy.
So I just want to ask you quickly, because I do want to move on to another question, but you've got a majority government that you're dealing with, your opposition third party. What are you going to do about it?
Well, we're going to, when the legislation comes forward, it's interesting. I would have thought, since this was sort of an icon issue for the Conservatives, they would have brought this legislation forward in June when the House came back. It would, one of the first things, they didn't bring it in June. They haven't brought it so far in this new session. They say maybe after Thanksgiving. We'll see. But the point is, I think they're finding it difficult to draft the legislation because it's not quite as simple as they thought it was. And they've done no business planning. They've done no market analysis.
Well, in all fairness, they've really just gotten back.
But if you're going to make this profound a decision this quickly, so you're going to introduce legislation this fall, and it will be in effect by August of next year, and we are going to change a $6 billion enterprise in that short period of time. Surely you would have done your homework in advance to figure out how to do it. But they quite candidly say, no, we haven't.
So just back to the question.
We haven't done any studies.
What are you going to do about it?
Well, we're going to debate the legislation vigorously. Petitions will be filed in the House. Farmers from around Western Canada are signing them. There's a legal case that's outstanding in the federal court about whether the government has the legal right to proceed. There'll no doubt be a lot of public meetings and public demonstrations, and this is really the critical thing. The plebiscite is one thing. It did express producer opinion, but if producers then just leave it at that, it won't go anywhere. What's needed is for farmers to continue to be vigorous and vigilant on this file. And the precedent I think you have to look at is the precedent with potash a year ago. Undoubtedly, Mr. Harper was moving toward approving the sale of the Potash Corporation.
So you're looking for a grassroots movement?
There has to be a grassroots movement saying, no, stop.